It's just basically the original two from Sports Intel, the board op on the first show, and myself. We got Dan D-Money in studio here, and he's getting everything ready to go. We've got Christmas lights. They aren't on, though, Dan. Were we supposed to turn them on? I don't know if we were supposed to do anything with that.
I'm not sure I know how.
So, I mean, it's not a visual medium, so we're okay there. We've got two things to celebrate. I think Dan's a good one. Now he's figuring out the Christmas lights here. Dan's a good one to help me with this one because I've talked about this on the other show that everything of the day now for December is just all cookies and pies and sweets. But the other one that I do like, I don't know if you like this movie, but the other theme that we could go with is Answer the Phone Like Elf Day. So basically we could start off the interviews and I could go, Buddy the Elf, what's your favorite color? So but then that's it. That's all. Then
I thought you were going to be like, "Oh, talking's my favorite."
That's
phone's my favorite.
Yeah, there you go. That's good too.
I remember Elf being like, "Everything's enthusiasm and everything is the greatest."
Yeah, and I think that's how he picks up the phone when he's at the office. He says, "Buddy the Elf, what's your favorite color?" When he's at his dad's office.
Oh, yeah, I remember that now.
So to have an Answer the Phone Like Elf Day is just very specific. I feel like
it's going to be very weird when I call the guest tonight because I have to do it now.
Well, they'll have fun with it. We still got a couple guests coming up. We've got Brock Vierra. He'll be coming up at 7:15. Nice thing here, since we're going to stretch out a little bit with the guests to kind of account for some of the time. Brock's got experience on both the pro and the college level, so we'll bring him into a bit of a college conversation.
The news is not over. Certainly, so there'll be plenty to talk about.
Exactly. I mean, it's the CFP we haven't talked about enough. I kind of have had that in the plans for this show, but we just haven't really talked a lot of CFP and college football. And I told Brock about a couple subjects we want to talk about, but there's obviously I'm an IU guy, so then that comes up, and it's a great story. I mean, it's not just because I'm from IU; it is one of the top college football stories.
I mean, when is a program like this come out of nowhere essentially and become a juggernaut?
That's the thing, because I told you all year that it's very surreal for me as an IU fan, and I'm not used to us being good. Now it's funny because now some of these other pundits that we talk to, people from Michigan State even, or some of the other schools that we talk to, now they're all looking for the next Curt Cignetti, because basically they're like, hey, if they can take basically the most losing school in college football, in major college football history, and turn them into the undisputed number one team.
Are they actually the most losing school? I just know they have like almost no football history. Is essentially how I heard it.
I've read somewhere that they are. I think I don't know the metrics on that, but I could believe it because they never really had years where they were even above 500. Right. Like if you think back to the Big Ten or some of these other big conferences, the SEC, ACC, whatever, Big 12, there's really not a lot of teams that are just always at the bottom. Like they might
around forever.
Yeah. They might have a couple peak years where they kind of get up there and then, their coach moves on and they go back down. Indiana never really had that. I was there for one of the best years in basically recent memory beyond the Cignetti stuff. And that was when Antoine Randall was there in 2001, and they still had a losing season, and he was an alternate for the Heisman that year. He was playing so well, but the team was just not good enough. Right. He was putting up 40, 50 points a game. He was unbelievable as a quarterback, and that was basically their peak year, and they still went like 5-7 or something that year.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. I know that the quarterback for Washington, did he transfer from Indiana?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
they had one good year. That was basically kind of erased by COVID, essentially. Okay. They were looking good that year, and they did have a legitimately good year because Penix was great. I was not a believer in him when he transferred to Washington, and not because of his ability at all, but I just thought his lower half was just done.
Yeah.
Because he had so many surgeries. He had 2 or 3 year-ending surgeries, and but he had a great rep at IU. Worked very well there. He worked with Kalen DeBoer, who ended up at Washington and now is at Alabama,
And possibly Michigan.
Well, that's the rumor. What do we think of these? The rumors are funny to me because they're kind of bouncing around with the different coaches, but he does seem like one that maybe isn't as happy at Alabama, even though they are in the college football playoff.
Midwest ties. Basically what I've heard is once Alabama's season done, Michigan may make him a Lane Kiffin type offer. Doesn't mean he takes it, but basically force him to truly say, I don't want to be there. Not money's not the issue, resources aren't the issue. Just, $100 million for however many years. See if he takes it. That's the one guy here that they want to actually give that offer to. I mean, it's not like he's really done a lot, but there's not a lot of options out there.
No, and I used to think that there were some end to this stuff, but now with Brian Kelly moving from Notre Dame to LSU, Kiffin moving from Mississippi to LSU, I don't really see it. You can't really discount anything at this point. Like, oh, this guy wouldn't necessarily move from this job to this job. I don't think you can say that anymore. We have no security when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, with the players not having to be loyal anymore, I mean, the coaches never really were. Now it's all just an even playing field. But yeah, money talks, and who knows where that's going. I mean, it's astronomical, and it seems no end in sight to what can be spent, where it can be spent, and how it can be spent.
Exactly. And that was one big thing I was getting when Cignetti was obviously getting very hot, and the Penn State job came open, and they were worried about him doing that like Kiffin did basically, and jump from one team to the other within the Big Ten. And I told him, and this wasn't because I was an IU guy, I said, I just don't see it with this guy at all, because he had worked so hard to get, and why he didn't get hired before this, I won't really know, because now he built up a James Madison program that's now in the college football playoff, which is another great storyline, with another great coach that he mentored, and now he's going to UCLA, and he'll be in the Big Ten too. But the idea that Cignetti, this is his first Power 5 job as a head coach, and he got it later in his life. He has a lot of experience, he even coached at Alabama as a position coach, but he's never gotten the big Power 5 job. So I didn't really think he was going to leave this job in his 50s, kind of advanced in his 50s. If he was in his 40s, I wouldn't have been as confident. I would have thought, well, okay, maybe I use more of a stepping stone. But I loved his response to people asking him, well, aren't you going to consider leaving IU? He's like, why? We're a powerhouse now.
Yeah.
You're like, where am I going to go?
Powerhouse. I think he said emerging.
Yeah.
So I mean, in that confidence, it works on people. I mean, I still remember the press. Google me from last, when it was introduced 2 years ago or whatever. But that was everywhere. It was Google me. I win.
And now he's bounced around from that to where he is now, and that has still followed him now in almost every interview. They talk about that, and he does a good job of, he's right at that line, because he is confident, but he's not overconfident. When you listen to his interviews, he's got a lot of substance to him. He's authentic. He kind of has a very firm understanding of who he is, which is kind of more in like the Dan Campbell category, where he's authentic. He's a little bit more confident than Campbell, I would say.
Locally, he kind of reminds me of a major program, the Ferris coach. Is it Tony Annese?
Tony Annese, yeah.
I mean, he just wins everywhere he goes, but Tony Annese is kind of in the same, he's in his mid-60s now, so I don't know that he would go somewhere else, because he's established, he's got a great job, and I mean, family's there, so I see why Cignetti would stay, and I don't think he's going anywhere.
No, and Annese is a great example, because we'd have to ask our buddy Steve Project over at the Sports Project, because he's pretty close with Tony and has had him on his show. I've interviewed Tony on Steve's show before, after he won the championship last year, and now they're gearing up for it again here. It's been a full year, I guess, since I did that, and that was with Trinidad Chambliss at the helm that year last year.
Yeah, I mean, and he's in the playoff. So, right? Isn't Trinidad with Ole Miss?
He's with Ole Miss, yeah.
Yeah, but, you brought up all these names. You talked about the guy leaving for UCLA from James Madison. It made me think of something. You realize at least 3 of the teams in the college football playoff, they're losing their head coach to another job. Like Lane Kiffin's already left, but I think Summerall and is the head coach of James Madison. They're in the playoff, right?
Yep, they're 12.
One's going to Florida, one's going to UCLA. They're already in the playoff. To go get a harder job to get to is it the challenge? Is it not sustainable at these schools? I don't get it.
It's a good point, especially nowadays, because yes, there are resources that you can find with some of these schools. That's what Michigan State's trying to do here locally now with Fitzgerald, and they're building up that trust. And obviously Michigan, that'll be part of the pitch that, hey, we've got, we're a dynasty program. We've got all these resources, but with the math changing, in the fact, I think you hit on the big point. For me, anyways, if I were a coach, I think the other reason that Cignetti wants to stay at Indiana is because they're never going to kick him out of town. It's not like they're going to, if he then goes back down and kind of goes back down to earth, so to speak.
If they become a 9-win team.
Yeah, he's kind of a middling.
Great, but it's not the new expectation. But
exactly. I mean, I know they're a dynasty program on the basketball side, but they're not going to have that wild of expectations now. Whereas you go to a Florida, you go to a Michigan, you go to an LSU, all these big dynasty programs, they're going to expect you to win. They're going to say, "Hey, we've got the rep, we've got the resources, we've given you everything. Where's our wins now?"
Even if you do win, 3 years later, you could be out of a job. So like LSU, the last 2 coaches, or at least Ogeron got fired, and then did they fire another national championship winning coach? Oh yeah, the guy who was good, rumored for Michigan. I can't remember his name. Les Miles.
Oh yeah.
So he lost his job too after winning a national championship. So that's not it's kind of a thankless job. I mean, I get the challenge, but you're going to be let go if you don't win.
You're expected to win. Yeah, exactly. You're expected to win. I mean, let's not forget, this isn't a popular team to talk about around here, but they were trying to fire Ryan Day at Ohio State before he won the college football playoff last year. He won the whole thing,
right?
And they were trying to fire him the year that he won it.
Yeah, last Saturday in November, they wanted him gone. January 1 or middle of January, he's the best coach in America. So what have you done for me lately? To the extreme.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think this we talked about this a little bit with Shayne the last couple of weeks, but I mean, something's got to kind of stop at some point because there's just too much movement. There's not really anything governing all of this stuff, and that's easier said than done. But they're going to eventually have to figure something out because for 2025, this is very Wild Westy here.
Yeah, not just with the coaches, but even with the players, because what did I say? That one USC quarterback or something, like he re-signed for the year, like he was a free agent. What? He was on scholarship. What is this? It's free agency on steroids.
And that's
worse than professional sports.
Oh, it is.
There's no contract holding you in.
It is. And I remember I have a lot of friends, family that have always liked college football. I've primarily been a pro guy across all the sports, but I have a lot of family members, friends that like college football better. And I kind of understood that until now, because it's like, well, I like that they're playing for the pride of their school, and I like that, they're young guys, and I guess they're still young, but they're also getting older because the average age, because now they're staying in school, so the average age is going up.
It seems like they're way more liberal with the medical red shirts, adding a 5th waiver year because this happened and this happened. I know. Look at the quarterback for the Saints. He was 27. Getting drafted. He had 7 years of college.
It's amazing to watch these guys coming in. He was that way. Bo Nix, even Michael Penix, who we talked about.
Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, Hendon Hooker. These guys, we're doing the math wrong because it's they're rookies. Yeah, but they're older than some of the guys that were drafted a year or two before them.
Exactly. I mean, I remember seeing something like that. It was this guy's been in the league for 3 years. He's 23. This guy's a rookie, and he's 3 years older than the rookie.
Right.
So it's oh, yeah, okay.
Exactly. It's funny how we do that, because then it's the potential of the person, and well, they might be a little bit old for that said potential. But yeah, interesting conversation. We'll talk a little bit more college football, but we'll also talk some pro football here with Brock Vierra of Rams on SI, and we'll talk about the game from last week, and see what else we get into. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Had a good conversation about college football in the first segment here, and we'll plan on talking a little bit more college football here with our next guest, because he covers both, and he covers both well. We'll be talking pro first here, but we want to welcome Brock Vierra to the show, and appreciate you making the time here tonight, Brock.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
We had to move them up a little bit because the Rams, it snuck up on me that the Rams are playing tonight. So this will be a quick turnaround time for the Rams here after that tough Sunday afternoon game.
Yes, and trust me when I say at the facility all week, everyone has just been talking about the difficulty on the body, especially when you play a Detroit team that loves to hit. And we got to see if that's going to be a factor for tonight's game. But considering what's on the line in the entire conference, I expect this to be a classic matchup.
You bring up a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that occurred to me. It's occurred to me earlier in the season, but that was a big thing. I liked the nicknames that were associated with that particular thing last year. They had the Honolulu flu for a while. I liked that as far as there was a real effect for when they played these teams, and then the next game after that was traditionally not a very good one for whoever they matched up with the week before. We're not seeing that to quite the same extent this year, both in the game and then afterwards, because I mean, the Rams are a team that, I mean, they're built, you talked about this in the preview, Brock, that they're built somewhat similarly. They're built with strong line play and then layering other items in. I think they have similar philosophies, obviously, from a management standpoint, because that's where Holmes came from. And then the coaches, although they have maybe different approaches, I think they're kind of cut from the same cloth to a degree. But the Rams really controlled the physicality in this game.
Montgomery was the main starter, able to provide that physical nature up front that automatically is going to weaken the opposing defensive line and the linebackers, depending on how effective, of course, your offensive linemen are able to advance that second level. And then you were able to supplement with a guy like Gibbs, who you're already tired for having to try and tackle a guy like David Montgomery. You're already been focused on his play style. So when you're able to add an element that attacks the opposition both mentally and physically in the way Blake Corum does, that's where you're seeing over the course of these past three games, starting from the Panthers into the Cardinals and then into the Lions, and then possibly again tonight, Corum has been on this expanded stretch. Another element to this is the fact that for being an NFL player, obviously he put a lot of mileage on him at the University of Michigan. He didn't play that much as a rookie. So he was able to have that year, kind of almost like a redshirt freshman year, and that's why you're seeing him pop out the way that he is currently.
That's a good point, too, because, yeah, he did have a ton of mileage, and it was kind of hard to see his fit to a degree when they initially took him, but he has provided that other part of the 1-2 punch there, and yeah, he's looked good. Those skill position players, they've transitioned nicely with that running game, and then obviously, even a couple years ago, you had Cooper Kupp, you had a lot of guys there that were providing a lot of offense, but now it's the era of Nakua, and he looked great. I mean, nobody could stick with him on the Lions. He's going to be tough to deal with here going forward for all of the teams that they end up playing against. Unfortunately, Adams got the injury, but I like a lot of their young receivers there too. So how do you see tonight playing out against the Seahawks? Because this will be a tough one, like you said, against the Lions, and then the Seahawks are another team that don't really get talked about on the national scale enough. But I was talking with somebody today about how they were calling the NFC North, that they in their opinion, it was the best division in the league. And I said, man, nobody's talking about this NFC West. At least I think it's starting to get into the national conversation a little bit, but not in the Midwest so much, I'm sure, out there. But man, it's a strong division.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, the only reason why the NFC West doesn't get the attention that it deserves this season is because of time zones. That most people, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, that afternoon slot of games when all the West Coast teams are starting, that's a lot of nap time. It's nap time for a lot of people on the East Coast after they got done with their early games that are waiting for Sunday Night Football. So you don't get to appreciate the situation that's currently happening out West right now. So this is what's going on. I'll fill everybody in. The Rams are the current leaders in the division and they're the current number one seed in the NFC conference. They're also tied with Seattle for the division and the conference league because they have the same record. If the Rams win tonight, they will have the tiebreaker over Seattle moving forward. However, if the Rams lose tonight, it then becomes a three-headed monster for the division and possibly the number one seed between the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers. The 49ers already split their season series with the Rams, and they play the Seahawks at home in the season finale, which could drastically change everything in the NFC, especially for the Lions, who are trying to figure out where they kind of fit in this puzzle. So that's why this game is, in my opinion, the most important game of the season so far.
And you're right about the time zone thing. It's something because that never really has bothered me. I'll watch a game no matter what time zone it is, or even if I don't stay up to watch it, I'll just record it for the next day. But I feel like this has also been a thing. I remember like when Denver was ascending in the NBA and everybody was like, who's this Jokic guy that's putting up all these triple doubles? And it took a lot to really get a lot of national press for him. Now he's won multiple MVP awards and he's a staple of the top of the league in almost everything, but they still really don't get a lot of press because it's the same thing, especially with something like basketball, because football, at least you're held to a schedule where you're not playing games at 10 o'clock at night local there or anything like that. But for basketball, you could have a game on at 10 o'clock here, and that game's not getting over till 1 o'clock in the morning, and you've got work in the morning or what have you. So I think you're right. They slowly made this ascent. They made the change to McDonald and then, added in Darnold. And I don't think anybody here was too impressed by that, but he had a very good year at Minnesota. I think they wrote that off. Now he's continued that. I think Stafford's been written off. And then I think a lot of people were thinking the 49ers were headed the other way. And then none of those things happened.
Yes, and it's a credit to the coaching of all those three teams. Obviously, Shanahan and McVay are established football minds, and you expect that from them. But when the Seahawks made the move to replace Pete Carroll with Mike McDonald, it was a stroke of genius. I didn't understand the move at the time, I'll gladly admit. But when you're seeing the framework of that defense, how strong the defensive line has come on in their reconstruction, and then you pair that with the efficiency of the offense, it's truly marvelous to watch. The unfortunate part for Sam Darnold is he's at a point of his career where a lot of those years from the Jets and the Panthers, to your point, they've lingered in everyone's mind. Plus, there's not really that massive jaw-dropping superstar at the quarterback position in the NFC West right now compared to some of the other stars we may see, which also detracts eyes. Obviously, Stafford is having an MVP season, but it's not like he's hurdling over three defenders on his way to doing it. So that's what I mean by that. But when you look at this Seattle team, and this is going to play in, of course, for the Lions as well, because there is that potential the Lions could be traveling to Seattle at some point during the postseason if both teams are able to get, or if Detroit's able to get in. They are one of the most fundamentally sound programs in the NFL. They all have, it's a great culture over there. They're all bought in. The entire roster is at some point in their physical prime, whether that's in the middle of it or at the ending, so there's not a lot of weak spots in that offense. And the only way to defeat them is to get Sam Darnold nervous. And when you have an offensive mind in Clint Kubiak, who's the Seahawks offense coordinator, who's able to understand how to manipulate different looks to reduce pressure to a certain area and then get the ball out to the place the defenders are not going to be, that's why you're able to have success with a quarterback like Darnold, who's under a contract that allows you to supplement the rest of the roster with tremendous players.
I don't think the Lions want to see anybody from the West. The history is dicey with all three of those teams, and yeah, they're all running pretty well. But they just want to make the playoffs at this point. So we'll see if they can make that push. But want to talk about the Lions game a little bit more with Brock after the break. We'll come back with Brock Vierra of Rams on SI. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Brock Vierra of Rams on SI, having a good conversation about the Rams and the Lions game. Wanted to talk more about the Lions game because one of the reasons that we like doing this segment, Brock, is it's nice to view things through other people's perspectives here. And one of the main narratives that's dominated the market here after that game is I think everybody understood that the Rams deserved to win that game, and there was they played a great game and all of that. But there was a lot of conversations about the officiating, specifically that call that with Parkinson, where he looked like he was down at the 1, and then there were some questions as to whether or not he secured that ball. I'm curious how you saw that call. I don't want to go. We don't have to analyze the refs and go too far into that, but I'm curious how you saw that call and wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about it, because obviously you're viewing that game a different way, but this gives me a more kind of objective view of it.
I think that was a touchdown. There's no way. I think when you see Rams offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur going, "Wow," when the refs confirm the call, it just kind of sums up that situation. I did think the catch was completed. I didn't see anything live or in replay that I would say would definitively overturn that call. A touchdown, though, in what world does that happen? Obviously, the argument is that Parkinson somehow was only able to establish control of the ball by the time he crossed the plane of the end zone. I don't know. When you have control of the ball with your knee down and nothing, not your body, not the ball, nothing is in the end zone, I don't understand how you can justify that as a touchdown call. But as we both know, that was one of several calls throughout that game that were just mind-boggling. I mean, since Lions fans are listening, the lack of defensive pass interference calls on Jamison Williams throughout that entire game, especially on 2 in particular, where Jamison Williams had clear touchdowns, it's kind of bizarre.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's why I said I didn't want to necessarily make it, and that's why I opened with the Rams part of it, because the Rams should have won that game. I don't want to ever go into a discussion of, that the only way that affected the game, which is the argument I made on Monday after the game, the only change that would have made, which I would have liked, and I think you would have maybe even liked, it is, I think, it did probably disrupt the momentum a little bit. Not enough to change who would have won, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more competitive game down the stretch. And I think that folded may have affected that. That's what I always lament for. Like you said, there's a lot of bad calls in every game, and they have a tendency to go both ways. Now, in this particular game, the Rams didn't have a lot of calls against them, but they also played a pretty clean game. I mean, they deserve credit for playing well, and yeah, maybe there were some calls missed on, like you said, on JMO. He doesn't have a tendency to get a ton of calls. I've seen that across the league, the way he plays. I think some of these guys, we'll have to ask Shayne about this when he comes back, but I'm sure some of these guys get coached in how to kind of draw a penalty and then show that they've drawn a penalty too, because I think that's sometimes where the Lions lose out, is they don't necessarily know how to handle the performance element. They're just pure play. They're trying to jam if they're a corner, or they're trying to release if they're a receiver, and they're not worried about that. But I'm glad you brought that up from that perspective, because yeah, you just want to see a good game, and when it starts affecting the gameplay and the flow of the game and how the game plays out, that's where I lament, not if my side was affected or your side was affected. It's more if we were denied a better, higher quality game.
Yes, and this is a very fair thing to say. Here, I unfortunately have to disagree with you. I think that there's no reason the Lions should have not won that game, unfortunately. And obviously the calls play a factor. And for the Rams, the only major call was actually kind of a big one for them. which was on that 4th and goal scenario where Amon-Ra St. Brown drew a penalty on Emmanuel Forbes, and that was not defensive pass interference on Forbes. Other calls, absolutely, that was not at all, and that just goes to the thing that we've been talking about this whole time. But when you look at how the Lions performed, the Lions, in my opinion, should have had that game dusted by halftime. If Jared Goff could have put the ball just a little bit more in front of his receivers a couple more times, I think that they could have expanded that lead before entering the locker room. And then, of course, had they been able to corral the Rams offense in their end of the first half surge, that also would have played a massive factor into it. The unfortunate part with a game of this nature is that there was so much on the line for this. And while no team season is over because of this result, the Lions are in a very tough spot where they realistically need to win out if they want to get into the playoffs. I don't think that should have been the case because they were deprived of so many opportunities that the Rams weren't. And that's just my opinion on that game in general. The one thing that I will say from just a tactical standpoint I want to add is that I think for the first time in a long time, Dan Campbell had a coach standing in front of him that might have been more courageous than he was on the day. That typically doesn't happen, especially for a guy who, in the game, went for it on 4th down in his own side of the field, and it wasn't like a game-ending scenario by any means. But when you have a coach like McVay, who has kind of turned the narrative of his career, at least for this season and some of his decision-making, going for it on 4th down, putting the ball in Stafford's hands on those 4th down calls, and then be willing to take it to the limit at any point in the game. When you have that sometimes the refs, they might feel a certain way, and they just let a certain team play a little bit more when they're being that aggressive.
That's a good point about the aggressiveness, because obviously I'm sure you watched some of the Lions before this, but that's been a common theme against the Lions this year because Campbell's got the rep. Every national broadcast that the Lions are on, they're always talking about it. They're talking about Dan Gamble, and they're talking about his level of aggression. But it's been interesting because coaches like a McVay, LaFleur's the same way in Green Bay, and that game, that second Green Bay game, really played out this way. LaFleur is one of the more conservative ones in my mind, and he made LaFleur get more aggressive, and it ended up working for him. That's part of the problem with this is I've been all for him being aggressive about his play calling, and it has primarily worked. And you can't play the result. You can't say, oh well, this time it didn't work and therefore it wasn't a good call. No, that's a little too rudimentary as far as how to view these things. You have to view them in a totality sense, and you have to look at a lot of the things that factor in. You could have still made a good play call, executed it pretty well, and it still didn't work out for whatever reason. There's plenty of plays that have been like that for the Lions over the course of this year, but the tide has turned a little bit for them on his calls, and I think that's somewhat because of how the other teams are handling them. Not only are they gearing up for the 4th downs and they're not surprised by it anymore, and they're expecting, okay, yeah, 3rd down, we're going to play this like we're going to be on the field on 4th down, which I think was the previous advantage to a degree, that they could play 3rd down like they knew 4th down was coming, whereas the defense didn't necessarily know that. Now the defense knows that. You can't necessarily queue up the same play on that 3rd down, have a 3rd down run on 3rd and 7, and have that work as well, because the defenses are prepared. Plus, they're upping their level of aggression, seeing the success of Campbell last year with it, and saying, hey, you're going to be aggressive and you're going to believe in our guys. We can believe in our guys too.
True, and obviously that's a credit to the culture that Campbell has established. Not only anyone can go for it, but to be able to execute at the level that the Lions do as often as they do it, it's going to make people react. The thing that kind of surprised me with the Rams' decision to go for it is often they've relied on their defense in these scenarios because the game is so early, and they've always felt they can throw themselves back into a game at any moment if they need to. It's a credit to the Lions that they had to go for it on 4th down as early as they did, because the Lions have an offense and who's run by Campbell that they can score it at any point, so you can't always throw yourself back into it. I do often wonder, what is Dan Campbell's next kind of, I don't want to use the word trick, because it's not a trick. This is genuinely him. But what's that next element that he's going to pull out that are going to make a lot of these coaches adjust? Because with LaFleur, as mentioned, they're all from the same coaching tree, which is that McVay coaching tree. A lot of guys from that tree, the Shanahan tree, the Sirianni tree is growing. So with those trees comes tendencies. What is going to be Campbell's tendency breaker moving forward? I honestly have no idea. It is something that hopefully maybe you could provide a little bit of insight on. What do you think?
It's a good question. I do think that Campbell doesn't get enough credit for how he handles some of these situations, because he is viewed as kind of one. I talk about this a lot on the show. He's viewed as one thing, because a lot of us like to view people as one thing. I think the Rams have a coach like this too. People want to view McVay as smart, which he's very smart. There's no way to not view him as smart, but I think he's got other elements to him, and that's what makes him such a dynamic, successful coach. It's the same with Campbell. With him, it's harder to view him as smart, because we got to view him as tough. We got to view him as the former blocking tight end that wanted to bite people's kneecaps in the press conference. But I think there's a lot more nuance to him, and I think his ability to figure out game flow, I think, will probably be where it comes from, because that's where Johnson got a lot of credit last year, as he should have, but Campbell, I think, deserves a lot of credit for the installation of this offense initially and for its success recently, because that kind of has gotten lost in the shuffle because they're still not winning to the degree that people want, and the defense hasn't played to the level that I think a lot of fans and probably a lot of people in the building would want. But I think Campbell is still finding the right notes. Okay, maybe the fourth down stuff isn't quite going his way, but I do think that he's going to find it. I'm wondering if it's going to be, so he's good at finding the advantages in the rule book too. I feel like they kind of took some of his moves away, because one of the things that he used to do is he used to do a surprise onside kickoff. Now he can't do that. So I'm curious where he's going to find it, but I have to think it's going to be something as far as, hey, everybody is going this way, I'm going to go that way. And I do like that he's a leader really in every sense, like McVay is. He's a very good leader as well. And Campbell's a leader in every sense, and I think he will lead the front to finding kind of a new game flow that will benefit them going forward. You know, they've lost a couple pieces. They've got to get those back. Laporta was a big loss. So once they get those back and get Tesla up, I think that could be give him a lot of weaponry to, you know, kind of retool and redo his strategy with.
Yes, and thank you so much for bringing it up. I don't understand where a narrative that I don't want to use the word stupid, because that's not what's being said, but Dan Campbell isn't on the same intellectual plane as his counterparts across the league. Anyone who believes that is the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard. In fact, I think that oftentimes, as we talk about, it gets masked, but you start seeing his intelligence in his brazenness, in his courage. It's not easy to be a first-year head coach and relieve Anthony Lynn, who was the offensive coordinator, of their duties at that early. It's not easy to promote a guy like Ben Johnson when there are other offensive play callers out there who have a bigger name to them, right? It's not easy, but it's also not easy to work under Sean Payton, as he did for all those years in New Orleans, or to endure what he did in Miami as a coach, or what he had to take care of during his time as a player. All of those things have made him a tough, gritty dude, but they've never taken away from the fact the guy's genuinely a smart person. He went to Texas A&M. And then you're seeing him be a head coach and a play caller in real time, and you see the success of it. Alongside everything that we just said, there's a lot of things that the Lions are experiencing now that they haven't experienced in a long time, probably not since Barry Sanders was playing for the franchise, which is an expectation of success, being a team that is not just supposed to compete, but has competed for the past couple of years, who's been a back-to-back division winner, who has had success in the playoffs, who are now picking in the back of the first round instead of the front. That talent pool gets a lot smaller, and obviously the Rams and Brad Holmes comes from that school, as we mentioned. they're great at picking up players throughout their entire draft, but it also takes time to establish certain cultural elements. For the Rams, they have a revolving door of offensive coordinators and certain position coaches because they're always getting promoted to bigger jobs, and it's fantastic. There's also a few coaches who have been there for the entire time, two guys in particular, running backs coach Ron Gold and wide receivers coach Eric Garber. They've been with McVay for the whole journey in Los Angeles, along with some other people. Campbell, who is that guy for Campbell? And even if he does have that guy, head coach, Campbell's nowhere close. So I think people need to go to the secondary transition of who we are. What are the next steps that we can take, as we mentioned, roster-wise, strategy-wise, whatever, to become that perennial threat? And I'll make this point. How many teams in the NFC, since Campbell has taken over, have won a Super Bowl? The Rams, the Eagles, and the Buccaneers? I think that's about it, unless I'm missing somebody. So it's Campbell deserves a lot of credit, is my main point. And I feel like he doesn't get it because he's known as this tough, gritty dude who has a blocky face and looks like he's ready to get into a bar fight at any moment's notice.
Exactly. I'm glad you said that, because I've been saying that on the show for a while, because it's like we only can take people in as one thing, and that's just not that doesn't give enough variety. That doesn't give enough credit to a lot of people that have built very varied lives that encompass a lot of different elements, and Campbell is like that. McVay has a lot of variety to him, and therefore has had a lot of success as a result. I'm glad you brought up the position coach thing too, and the fact that he has had those two position coaches for so long, because I think we lose track. We highlighted the coordinators leaving this year. The Rams have that virtually every year where their coordinators leave, but the culture stays with the head coach in both places, Campbell and McVay, but it is oftentimes about the coaches underneath too. Are you promoting them internally? Are they getting promoted elsewhere? Because the Lions lost a lot of their internal position coaches. They did retain a couple, and so it remains to be seen who those guys will be for Campbell. Will that be like a Scotty Montgomery? Will that be Hank Fraley? Those guys both stayed, but some went with Glenn, some went with Johnson, and that's what happens when your coordinators leave, because they can elevate everybody else. But it's a good discussion about coaching as a whole and the mentality and how we view everything, because I think it's an interesting topic, and certainly one we could cover more. But want to take another quick break and then hopefully cover a few more topics with you before you leave here. But great conversation with Brock Vierra so far. Stick with us. You're coming back here with Brock Vierra. Good conversation about the Rams. We only got a few minutes here. I liked the coaching conversation. I wanted to pepper in a couple college football topics, since you also cover that. And there's been, we talked a little bit in the first segment about some of my interests here, because I'm an IU grad, as you know, and they're a great story. I think there's a lot of great storylines in college football right now. That's a great story. Trinidad Chambliss State and Forest Hills. He's now Ole Miss team without Lane Kiffin. And then this one might be kind of near and dear to your heart, to Brock. We talked about this last week with Shayne after our segment with you, but we talked about the Tokyo Toe, and at that earlier. That to me is one of my favorite stories in college football as a whole. A guy that didn't know how to kick, and then taught himself via YouTube, and now was perfect and was nominated for the Grozo Award. I was really hoping he would get it, but he came up just short. But to be nominated is amazing.
It really is. I'm so glad you brought him up. Obviously, Kansei Matsuzawa has been phenomenal this year. Mountain West Special Teams Player of the Year, first team All Mountain West. And for me, I'm from Hawaii, so I always got love for the Rainbow Warriors. To see a guy from the islands, obviously, come over, embrace himself into the culture, do great things, and then be awarded by being a consensus All-American. What more could you love about this story? From the University of Hawaii, I've seen some terrible ones, too, so it ebbs and flows. But when you get a chance to see Matsuzawa take a picture picture next to a guy like Jason Elam, it's incredible.
And to listen to Shayne talk about him last week, because he's reached out to Shayne and they haven't met yet, but he's been getting some advice from him. Just the fact that he's doing those things makes you believe in him even more too, because obviously the guy wants to learn. I mean, he went so far as to bring everything up on YouTube and just learn that way. But now, I mean, there's got to be a compounding effect almost here too, because he's cleared that first hurdle of clearly he's a good kicker. Clearly he's kicking very well for Hawaii. But he also has to have a ton of untapped potential too, because if he's just teaching himself on YouTube and then coming over, obviously he's had now collegiate coaching but he's also had to do a lot while he's been over here. So I'm sure there's a lot of adjustments that can be made in his game. Plus he hasn't really necessarily had the pro level of it. So the fact that he's reaching out to the Shayne Grahams and other kickers of the world, that's a good sign. Could culminate in him going to the pros, which would be amazing.
It really could, and I don't see a scenario in which he doesn't at least get an opportunity. I mean, look at Detroit. How did the Lions find their kicker, right? So it's not always the traditional path to the NFL for anyone, but especially special teamers anymore. And there's always been an influx of foreign players being great at the special team positions throughout the history of the NFL. So it's not like he's doing something that's unprecedented. Even the whole YouTube spot. Luis Perez learned how to play quarterback on YouTube. So that's another thing that's not unprecedented as well. I just want to add, for me, as much as I'm happy for Conte, I do have a bit of regret because a long time ago, when I think I was like 13 years old, I was at a Raiders game in a tailgate. I was a bigger kid for my size because my mom fed me well. And some guy who was clearly inebriated came up to me and said, if you learn how to long snap on YouTube, you can go to college. And obviously, maybe that could have been a possibility if I had listened to him. But with all that being said, when you look at how the entire league has been looking at kickers, I look at the Rams as like the golden example. They had a phenomenal kicker last season in Joshua Carty. Things happened this year. It wasn't working out. They bring Harrison Nevis in, who has been playing the UFL, then just kicking like around. He was chilling at his house in Columbia, Missouri, gets a call and hasn't missed a kick since. Why wouldn't you want to take a shot at a guy like this?
I'm glad you brought him up, because Shayne, that was going to be one of my next questions, because Shayne, after we got off the air last week, he said, oh shoot, I wanted to ask him about the thicker kicker, Harrison Mevis. So I'm glad we got to him, because he was always one of my favorites in college for maybe aforementioned reasons, but he played with a nice exuberance for the game, little different body type for the position. Apparently has been in touch with Shayne as well, and he's been trying to help him out too, but he was happy that he was able to make it. And yeah, he's doing pretty well so far, because like you said, he's not missing anything, and he's looking good. So he might stick. You don't want to give up on these guys too easily, because like you said, UFL, I guess learning on YouTube or however they got there. If they can do it and they can have that medal and they can power through, then that's your guy.
Yes, and for the Rams organization, there's a lot of regret when it comes to that kicking position, and that's why they brought back Joshua Carty on the practice squad, because they had Cameron Dicker in the building. He was signed to them. They didn't need a kicker at that time. Little did they know they would definitely need a kicker that season. But then Dicker was able to go to Philadelphia, have success there for like a game or so, and now he's with the Chargers, where he's established himself as the NFL's best kicker. Jake Bates, another phenomenal story. Everyone had a chance to go get him. Obviously, him playing in the building, in the city, that allowed Detroit to get closer eyes on him, and now he's been a strong force for Detroit so far. So when you look at a guy like Matsuzawa, and just everyone at the collegiate level, Nevis as well, and you see that they don't have they have a gap in their resume, that also means that the leg is fresh. And when I spoke to special teams coordinator, all of us as reporters spoke to special teams coordinator Chase Blackburn, he talked about the elements that made Nevis such a special kicker. And it all came from his quickness and his delivery of the kick. His ability to, one, not need to take a tremendous stride to get the ball up, and then his ability to get his legs through in the time in which he does allows the Rams to do certain things with their protection that will prohibit the other team from blocking it, unlike what happened to Joshua Cardi many times this season, most notably against the Eagles, and Jordan Davis took it all the way to the house to end the game.
That was a tough one there for the Rams. But, yeah, great stuff. I'm glad we could have, all the conversations that we did. They talked about the kickers, talked about a good conversation about the coaches. But great stuff, as always. Want to make sure to give you a chance to tell people where they can go to follow you here.
Of course. I really enjoyed my time. Thank you so much for having me. And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Brock Vierra. That's Vierra with 2 R's, Vierra. And then also you can find all of our work at Los Angeles Rams on SI or www.si.com/NFL/Rams/on SI.
Be sure to follow him. He's got great knowledge. He will also be doing college football stuff, like we were talking about. But thanks for joining the show again, Brock, and hopefully we'll talk to you again here soon.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck to your Lions.
Same to the Rams. Thanks, Brock. Take care. Appreciate Brock Vierra coming on. Great stuff from him, as always. We're going to turn our attention to the Lions side of things and get Tyler Sawa, the host of the Pride podcast, on and talk a little Lions with him because we haven't got his thoughts for the season yet. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM.
From the Scully Statewide Moving Studios.
Country with a Twist, Jethro FM, 1530 AM, WYGR, Wyoming, Grand Rapids, 94.9 FM, Grand Rapids, 99.5 FM, Lowell, and Jethro South, 980 AM, WAKV Otsego, Plainwell, 98.9 FM, Otsego, and 105.1 FM, Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
Happy to bring on this next guest. We haven't talked to him yet in season here this year. Tyler Sawa, the host of the Pride podcast. Good stuff on the Lions, and we've got to talk some Lions. We talked to him from the Rams side here with Brock Vierra, but now we've got to talk from the Lions side. I'm curious, Tyler, what stuck out to you with the last game and the season so far here, because there's certainly some narratives that we've seen, but I haven't talked to you over the course of this season, so I'm curious what's caught your eye the most here.
Yeah, so the last game, to me, it kind of went as expected. Honestly, I thought there'd be a dogfight game, but a game where they probably ultimately, come up short. And I just feel like that's just kind of been the team we've seen this year from the Detroit Lions, right? Like, they are a scrappy team, they are a good team, but they are not once the juggernaut that they were last year or even maybe 2 years ago, with all the adjustment that's been going on with the coaching staff, some personnel issues. So, I mean, it's tough right now, man. Like I said, I think it's a good football team. I don't think it's a great football team. It's just kind of where I sit right now, and I thought last Sunday was a great example where they are. The Rams are a great football team, and, they showed on Sunday that they are a more superior team over the Lions right now, and I think the results showed that last Sunday.
It's interesting because we had Brock Vierra from Rams on SI on before you, and he was really under the impression I guess he was kind of putting the Lions over to a degree. He was under the impression that the Lions really should have won that game. That was an interesting standpoint from especially an opposing team's beat writer, but I was kind of with you. It seemed like they played a more complete game. We were talking with Brock about that. I think one of the differences between this year and the last couple, especially last year, is the physicality advantage doesn't seem to be going to the Lions quite as much. They are a very physical team. That could be one of the many reasons that contributes to the fact that they do get broken down a little bit. They do have some of the injury issues because they compete so hard in practice and all of that. Not that all the teams don't, but there is a higher percentage of some of these things with the Lions. But they just don't seem to have that same physicality advantage where they're wearing the other teams down as the game goes on. It's more so it's kind of even, and if one team is getting worn down, it's sometimes the Lions, which I think was the case with that Rams game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Something that the Lions used to, I think, take a lot of pride in on, both sides of the ball was the trenches. I mean, they were never a great pass rush team under this regime, or, it feels like a really long time, right? But they were really stout at stopping the run game. It felt like every week it didn't really matter who the matchup was. It didn't matter how hot the running back was or how good that offensive line was playing. One thing the Lions were always great at was stopping the run, and just feels like this year when they play against a good offensive line, it just feels like you said, like they're just not the dominant team that like we're used to seeing from last year. And I don't know if that's an adjustment with defensive coordinators, but it just seems like on both sides of the ball. And, going back to the offensive side of the ball, too, it's like losing Frank Ragnow. You're just seeing the offensive line play is just not as dominant as it once was. And I think that's why you're seeing a little bit of a regression from this team. Like, it's still a good football team. They still have a lot of talented players. I mean, it's not like all hell's broken loose with this football team. But when you look at the physicality and at the trenches from both sides, it's just not as dominant as it was a year ago or even two.
You mentioned the defensive injuries and some of the people missing, it contributing to that physicality. That's been one of the interesting storylines to me, because obviously the injuries have been a little bit more concentrated this year. Still on the defense for the most part. Laporta was a huge injury, and they've had some other ones on offense, but it's primarily at tight end. But the defense is what's been hit hard, and specifically the defensive backfield. That's where most of the injuries have gotten concentrated into. A couple line injuries, but thankfully the linebackers have been pretty healthy and played very nicely as a unit. But the part last year, I remember last year, it was kind of like you didn't know when the tipping point was going to happen, because there were all these injuries, but they just kept continuing on, and they were losing huge players. They were losing Hutch and McNeil and all these key players, and they just kept going. And then it seemed like the Anzalone injury, not that it was solely about him, but it seemed like that was kind of the tipping point. And once he went out, then the defense really took a step back. They were already retreating a little bit because, like you said, they also had the coordinator change, and they were trying to work in a lot of new personnel this year. But I actually think that some of these defensive backs have acquitted themselves well, yet the thinning out, especially on the back end, because you're losing Joseph, who's your ball hawk, and you can isolate a little bit more in the defensive backfield, and Branch, who that's one of the elements that I think is kind of underrated about missing these guys from the defensive backfield is two in particular. Branch and Arnold have been, you can say what you want about Arnold, but he's been pretty stout in run support, as has Branch, and obviously he blitzes, he does a lot of different things for him, but it seems like we're seeing it at that side too. And then the guys that are out there aren't maybe necessarily particularly healthy, like a DJ Reed.
Yeah, no, I think you assessed it really well right there. I mean, Brian Branch in particular, right? Like, I've always said it, I think he is, if not the most important defensive player out there, the second most important defensive player out there, because, usually you give the edge to like an edge rusher, maybe a nice interior defensive lineman. But, I think like after Aiden Hutchinson, like the most important player for this defense, especially this defense, that has Brian Branch kind of be that Swiss Army knife that he can do whatever he really wants. If it is go blitz, if it is go play coverage, like, he was so important to this team. And, losing him, during this stretch run, and, you're going to probably lose him for some parts of next year as well. Like, just a big major loss. And like you mentioned with Kirby Joseph, like, he's now been out for, what has it been, over 2 months now? He hasn't played since the Kansas City Chiefs game. Yeah, it's been a blow. And you're seeing, it is hard to adjust when you don't have your main guys out there. And, Shep, too, first-time coordinator, like, it's tough, man. There's a lot on his plate to kind of fix it, and when you don't have your main core of guys, I think it makes it a lot tougher. But like you said last year, it's like they kind of just kept chugging along. It's like, man, when are they going to fall apart? And then you finally saw it in the playoff game versus Washington. This year's just a little different, man. Everything's just been a little harder. Like I said, I still think they're a good football team, but it's not as easy as it once was last year when they kind of had everything all clicking.
Exactly. And I don't want this to be all doom and gloom, because I feel like, and I'm the one that started the tone of it, but I still think they could make a run. That the one advantage of what's going on here is, although they may not have the prowess that they have had the last couple years, I would say that although there are some clear-cut teams towards the top, like the Rams, the Seahawks, who are going to battle here in minutes for maybe the division title over there, or at least to get some pieces there. San Francisco is still playing well. That whole NFC West, aside from Arizona, is playing very well. But it seems a little bit more wide open this year with some of these new emerging folks like the Seahawks. The Rams kind of bounced back to more of an effect than I think most thought. Same with the 49ers. But it's still a little bit more wide open on both the AFC and the NFC side. So you could see if they could kind of channel some of the stuff from last year. But I'm with you. I think the branch thing was what kind of took the air out of my sails to a degree. I could see overcoming the Joseph injury maybe, although that would be a very tough one. But then to go from, okay, you have Branch and then you maybe get Joseph back, to now we don't have Branch for sure, and Joseph isn't likely to contribute in a meaningful way here the rest of the year. That was a tough blow, but it is pretty impressive at what they've been able to cobble together, because I said this to Brock, but one of the things that we're losing track of with kind of the defense and some of the lacking and the problems there is the fact that the offense is playing very well, especially once Campbell put it back in his hands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to kind of go back to your playoff point right now. And I think it's a great point. Like, all the Lions need to do right now in these next 3 games is take care of business and let the rest figure it out. Like, yes, you don't technically control your own destiny, but if you go out there and win out, you have a pretty damn good shot of making the playoffs. So it's kind of just get in. And like you mentioned, like, there's not many juggernauts, right? Like, even the Rams, like, I think a lot of people consider them the best team in the NFC, if not the best team in the NFL right now, just the way they've looked so far. And you saw a clear example last Sunday. Like, they are a team that plays a good brand of football, but if you play like how the Lions played for the first half and, could do that for a 4-quarter game, like, this is a team that is beatable to a certain extent. It's a tough game. You have to play a damn near perfect game to beat them. But, like, in the playoffs, everything's on the table. It's one game. Anything could happen. So the Lions' biggest mission for these next 3 games has to, just get in. I mean, division's going to be tough at this point right now with some of the big division losses, but just get in and see what you could do and see what the season still is. Because, like you mentioned, like, as poor as it looks at some points, and like, you're sitting at 8-6, it doesn't look great, but it's not terrible. This is an opportunity for them to go out there and take advantage of the situation and, go get hot and go see what you can do in the postseason. But yeah, I mean, the offense, we've seen it the last, couple of weeks. I feel like they kind of got their offensive line, kind of intact now, right? Like, I think they're kind of finally adjusting. It's not as dominant as it once was, and you're not going to get that this year with these group of guys. But I feel like once Coyote Oshika went out, and they've been kind of doing the Tristan Colon and Miles Frazier, and it looks like he might be getting Mahogany back as soon as this upcoming Sunday, I feel like the offensive line play has been a lot better recently, and you're seeing a more confident Jared Goff. And when he's playing confident, he's protected, that's when this offense is clicking. That's when you see the Amon-Ra St. Brown, you see the Jameson Williams get involved, and, now you're seeing a little bit more Jahmyr Gibbs involved in the passing game. So the offense is clicking right now for the most part. So if they could just keep it going for these next 3 games, get the offensive line playing right, keep Jared Goff clean, I don't see why this offense can't keep clicking the rest of the way.
And I think that's worth mentioning and important to kind of emphasize the positive side of, because although we're used to this offense working very well, especially under Ben Johnson the last couple seasons, they scuffled a little bit at the beginning of the season. They had some individual performances that were very good. They weren't clicking quite the same way. Laporta was having a great year. I think kind of an underrated year before he went out. Then he goes out. The tight end group is decimated. Campbell ends up taking over. And quietly, with kind of this, with missing one of the better players for this year, with this kind of makeshift, as you referenced, offensive line, they're doing a very impressive job, both from a play calling standpoint and getting a feel for that from his side of things, and kind of maybe because to go back to it after basically passing it over to Ben Johnson a couple years ago, it's impressive how well he's found the flow again with what is an impressive unit of offensive pieces, but still down a couple of key pieces. And like you said, working with a makeshift offensive line that isn't the strength that it was in previous years, although they're trying to build back up to it.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think right now that you're kind of seeing that kind of missing this offense is like the Sam Laporta, even like a Brock Wright. I think he was a guy that was, being not one of Jared Goff's favorite targets, but he's a reliable guy, especially when Laporta was out. And, at the moment right now, you don't have either of them. And I just feel like the Lions are kind of missing that third guy. Like, what you're going to get out of Amon-Ra St. Brown every Sunday. What you're going to get out of James Williams for the most part every Sunday. I just feel like they're missing that third target right now. And I'm kind of waiting for one of these dudes to emerge. I feel like everyone was kind of expecting to hopefully be Tesla, right? Because, they had put some resources into him and traded a couple picks to get him in the third round. And, you have a guy like Khalif Raymond, who is always, a steady, solid option. But, I think if the Lions could really get another good third option for Jared Goff, and hopefully it comes this year, right? Because I'm not worried about the long term, but more of this year. This already good offense, I think, could really take a next step, because the one problem with this offense is sometimes you see it stall out a little bit. And you saw it last game versus the Rams was a prime example of that. Like, they were playing dominant in that first half, had a good control of this game. But when you start stalling out a little bit, you just don't have the defense to really rely on. And your offense has to almost be perfect every single game if you want to go out there and, beat these good teams, especially if we're talking about potentially playing January football.
I still think it could be to Sly. I think his holdup has been the fact that he hasn't necessarily gotten all the way through the different formations, and I think he's kind of, I can't say played himself off the field, but hasn't necessarily played himself onto the field with picking up all the nuances of the offense, which is tough, and he can only get so many reps in practice and look at them so many times and try to memorize them. But he's a local guy here, everybody's following him, and I think obviously he's made some highlight reel plays when he's been in there, and he is, if you watch him, he is getting open in a lot of his routes. It's just the idea that it kind of looks like it mirrors a little bit early Goff and early JMO, where it was just like they weren't quite on the same page. And I think that's to Slot to a degree, because this is built on precision. Goff loves a precise wide receiver, which is why he gets along with St. Brown so well. JMO has gotten a lot better in that category, especially this last season here. And I think Tesla will get there, but like you said, it's a matter of, does he need another full off season to do that, or can it kind of come together as we're approaching the playoff run here?
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, Ryan. I feel like even back in the LA days or St. Louis days when Goff was there, right? Like it always did take a bit of a minute for him to get it adjusted with those big X receivers or just those outside receivers in general. Like, he's always loved the slot receivers or the tight ends, and we've seen a prime example of that just in Detroit, right? With Sam Laporta since he's been here, obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown, since he's been here. And then even when he was with the Rams, you saw it a lot with Tyler Higbee and Cooper Kupp at that time. So, like, those are usually his type of guys, and it does take a little bit of a minute to get the Jameson Williams, or in the Rams' perspective, the Robert Woods or the Brandon Cooks involved. And like you said, we saw that adjustment with Jameson Williams, and I feel like since Cam was really taking over the play calling, we've really seen that connection's kind of taken a level, next step going forward, and you're seeing JMO a lot more involved in this offense. So, hopefully that could be the same deal with Tesla. But like you said, it's going to be an interesting question. Could he figure it out, as soon as this Sunday or within these next 3 games? Or is it going to be one of those instances where most likely it's going to have to be another offseason and, get that connection, really down?
It is tough to have the progression, especially that he did, because he went from being a quarterback in high school, wing T style quarterback, and then became a receiver, but that was at Hillsdale, converted receiver, played very well there, then made a huge jump from there to Arkansas. Didn't necessarily see the variety in the offense there. This was a point that someone made to me recently. They were talking about how he was kind of he was basically limited to the X position when he was at Arkansas, or limited to the Z position, I should say, limited to the slot at Arkansas. And so you don't necessarily get the full range probably at Hillsdale for sure in that offense. Then you don't get the full range at Arkansas. You didn't really learn anything from a receiving standpoint while you were in high school. And then now you're making these huge jumps. And although he's got a lot of physical traits, he's got the mental chops from what I can see here. We've interviewed him actually on the station. I interviewed him before the draft. Clearly picks up on things well, and the Lions saw that. But those are still huge jumps that if you don't have any base for the learning those different steps, it's tough to then execute it and go, okay, you know how you didn't really have a lot of groundwork for this while you were in college and high school? Now I need you to put it together against the biggest, strongest, fastest athletes in the world on the fly as the plane is going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise of the adjustment that we're seeing with him. I think the player itself, I think he's going to be fine in the long run. It's just, I feel like it'd be really nice if he could, or just someone, it doesn't necessarily even have to be him, but like, I think a lot of people look at him just because where he was drafted and all that. If just someone could emerge that third option, just with Laporta being out, like they're missing another safety blanket because, when you look at like a third and medium or a third and long, it used to be always it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown or Sam Laporta. And right now it just feels like it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. It could be a Jamison Williams. If they can just get that another guy, I really feel like this already good offense could really take another step even this year, which is going to get even scarier and give this Lions team even a more legitimate chance to go do something crazy.
I'm hoping that they're finding some answers here at tight end because they're shifting things around at tight end. I thought that Rucci would kind of catch on. There were some nice things said around the league about him, especially coming from the Dolphins. He seemed to be one that may have worked that didn't necessarily work out. You got Zylstra coming back into the fold. He's the one most familiar with the offense. So hopefully they can kind of cobble that together because missing basically, as you highlighted, that whole unit is a big deal, not just Laporta but Wright, and then being down Zylstra and having to sign all these guys off of different practice squads and everything. That's been tough because that's another key part for this where they're trying to learn the offense on the fly and all of that. So hopefully they can put it together for a stretch run here, but I'm excited to see what they do. Appreciate you coming on and covering them for us. I know we got to get you out of here, but make sure to tell the people where they can follow you here.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Tyler_Sawa, or you could find our podcast on wherever you get your podcasts at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and we're also on YouTube as well on game day. So you can come join us there. And that's pretty much it. I appreciate you having me on, Ryan.
Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll have you back on again soon, and hopefully we get a lot more season here to work with.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks, Tyler. Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks to Tyler Sawa. Appreciate him joining the show. Now we had to shift some of the guests around, so Dan and I we're gonna brainstorm in the break, see what we want to do here for the rest of the show. Oh, I thought he got the Christmas lights going. He didn't get those going yet. We haven't figured that out yet either. It's just the two of us. You got to give us a break. We're doing the best we can here, but yeah, come back with us after the break, and we might have to have a plan for you here. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Glad you could join us for those segments. Those were good segments. I really like the segments with Brock. He always gives good information and real unbiased perspective there. Back with Dan and I in studio. Big update. Dan got one of the strands of the Christmas lights going, so I'm feeling very festive here.
It was high tech work.
I mean, it was that was good producing. I don't know what to do with this other strand. It doesn't look like it goes to anything.
Yeah, obviously nobody can see, but it's two female ends, and I don't see where to plug it. Like what could reach it possibly?
It's just like draped over a pair of speakers here. Okay, so Dan, we gotta strategize a little bit. So either you gotta deal with me for the next half hour, which that's one of our options, and talk to me some more, or we could do something that we rarely do on the show. We've only done it one other time, and that's try to take a caller.
I mean, it's always risky because you never know what they're going to bring to the table, and we do have the cough button, I guess, but. Yeah, I'm willing to take the risk if you are.
All right. Well, it's just Dan and I, so that's the decision making tree here right now. So I think we're gonna settle on that. We're gonna take a caller. We're gonna see how this goes. We don't take a ton of callers on this show, but I'm not opposed to it. We'd like to hear from the people. Certainly, Shayne's talked about wanting to do more of that and talk about some inspirational stories, which I'm all for that. But we'll see what we got. We'll see what topics we can get into, and we'll do this experiment here, and then maybe it'll be something we'll like and do more in the future here. But so we'll take a quick break, and then we'll see who Dan can get on the line here. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. It seems like Dan was working. I had to take a quick bathroom break, but Dan was working the lines. We got someone on the line here, Dan?
Yeah, we have a gentleman who I guess he just wants to be referred to as him. He didn't give me a name.
Oh, okay.
So this is already off to a promising anonymous start.
I like it. It's anonymous. Okay, so is this somebody I know? Is this somebody I don't know? Is this just a caller? So him, are you on the line here?
Am I talking to Ryan Walsh?
You are talking to Ryan Walsh. How are you, sir?
Am I talking to 2006 IU graduate Ryan Walsh?
Oh, I think I recognize this voice here because he must want to talk some IU football. I think this is my old buddy Matt. Him and I went to college together. We're still friends, and you want to talk some Hoosiers football?
I'm a big fan. Let's talk some IU football. I've been long-time listener to the show. Just want to say I've noticed you've done something different with your voice the past couple of weeks. Sounding good. I like that you're trying different things out.
We're going with a Christmas husk here to my voice. How's it sound to you?
Well, I mean, it's December. You know, everyone's playing hurt. No one's their good self. So here you are, gutting it out with the team. I like that.
Yeah, no days off here. I've kept the streak up. I'm not sure. I'd like to get to at least 100 shows without taking one off, but we'll see what happens there. But I'm happy to have you on here. I'm happy that this is the caller. No offense to any other callers that were trying to call in, but no, this will be fun because it's funny, Matt, because I've had different discussions with my content producer Rex, who you know, and we've talked about IU in general, especially when we were more Michigan based. We didn't really talk a lot of IU as things were developing with IU, but then in that time they've basically become, because I think you're having a similar experience, they've basically become the best story in college football to a degree, really unbeknownst to us, because we were watching it happen going, wait, why is our team, did they switch the uniforms? Why is our team good at football? And so it kind of snuck up on us, but it really is one of the better stories in college football here.
It's such a strange position to be in. I think even after last year, rode the highs, got all excited with what Rourke was doing, and Cignetti seemed like he got him a good season, and then came in the Old Dominion game was pretty close. I don't know about you, but at that time I thought, we had a good year last year, and we'll limp through this season. Turns out Old Dominion wasn't as bad as I was expecting them to be, and IU found another gear.
Well, they were quick to write off IU just like they were last year. I feel like that happened a lot last year. We saw it with the schedule strength thing, and then not playing anybody really of substance during the regular season, and then losing to Ohio State and then Notre Dame. But those teams also faced off for the championship last year. So of the teams to lose that's not so bad. Plus, their margin of victory was competitive with the top teams in the country. It was competitive with the Georgias and the Alabamas and these teams that don't necessarily have the schedule strength at the beginning of the season, but blow teams out 70-7. That's what Indiana was doing. Then this year they started out the season not doing that, but they kicked it into gear quickly. And one of the things that I was telling people at the beginning of the season is hey, people were excited once Rourke came there and what Cignetti was able to do with them, but Mendoza was a much better starting point, a much better Mendoza line, if you will, and he ended up being obviously the Heisman, which is an interesting sentence for an Indiana fan, but I mean, he was at a better starting point coming from Cal, and now you can kind of see in real time them playing themselves up to kind of a different echelon. We were talking about that, Dan and I, earlier in the show, how, hey, they're the emerging powerhouse now. They're not having to compete with guys from James Madison. They're able to go out there and be competitive with some of these top teams to recruit top talent.
It's crazy, and it's crazy how much Sig gets out of his players, right? I mean, I think Fernando came in, like you said, a really good fit and a good prospect, but as the season went in, he really shaped up too, and like you said, finishing way above the Mendoza line, so to speak. But I think Fernando's season was incredible. I think there's a lot of ways we can take this conversation, because I think we can agree that being the number one team, like the consensus number one team in the nation, the number one CFP seed, and having the Heisman winner, there's a lot to unpack from the season. But if it's okay, I actually want to skip that for now, because I'm curious what your take and your perspective might be for what next season looks like for the Hoosiers. And I want to get a couple of thoughts from you. One is just like, this has been such a breakneck speed kind of turnaround. What do you think? What is the bottom of IU? Like, if you were to take a pessimistic view, what would the worst IU performance next year be that you would still be happy with? Has your expectation of IU football just tiered way up now based on 2 seasons, or what's your take?
Well, we were talking about that a little bit because obviously Indiana's dynasty program on the basketball side, so they do have a little bit of an entitlement there, especially when they try to find coaches, and even though they haven't had a ton of winning to the degree that they used to, they're still expecting to get the top guy. Now, they already have the coach on the football side, but it will be interesting to see how those things change. I think it's going to be very hard for Cignetti to fall out of favor, but there is a lot of impatience in the modern day. We were talking about that with NIL and the transfer portal and everything. But I mean, I think he's done a couple things with this program, with the turnaround, the way that he's done it. He's made a lot of young players want to play for him, clearly. And I think he's also shown, because pretty much every quarterback that's played for him, even at James Madison, really excelled there. Then he gets Rourke from kind of a mid-conference school in Ohio, and then turns him into something. Now he's turning Mendoza into the Heisman winner, and also, you know, maybe the likely number one pick from what some of the early estimates are. So I think he can stay pretty consistent and still get somebody from the transfer portal that's legitimately going to want to come there, because he's almost putting himself on the level of like, well, I don't know if Lane Kiffin's a great example, but he does turn quarterbacks around. He also leaves a lot, which Cignetti isn't doing. But I think Dan brought up the possibility of a 9-win season, say, next year, and asked about that. And I think that would be completely acceptable. I think it's okay that they, you know, would go down there, but I don't think Cignetti's going to find that acceptable. And that's what's kind of cool about this is his, if he was able to do what he did the first year with basically all James Madison recruits, then kind of improved his standing with that year, he's now solidified this even more, both on the recruiting side, which seems to be a lot higher from what I've seen, that they're inching towards maybe a more of a top 25 class, which you and I both know they could never really get, or through the transfer portal, there's going to be there's quarterbacks that I've seen rumored to them that are choosing between them and LSU or them and some of these other perennial powerhouses. And it's like, really, these are the two choices. But with what Cignetti's done, you can't really question it.
No, it's true. And I think what I like most about Cignetti is it's got a little bit of what I've loved about kind of what Brad Holmes brought to the Lions, which is, he's not always taking the consensus top of everyone else's draft board. He's really good at drafting for fit. And I think Cignetti does the same thing from a recruiting side. He's really good at identifying the talent that fits within the system. And I think he spoke about Fernando that way leading up to the Heisman ceremony. He was asked point blank, look, is Fernando Mendoza the best quarterback in the nation? And his response was, Fernando Mendoza is the best quarterback for our program or for us. And I think he's got a good understanding of what he wants out of the team and the right fits to identify, even if they're not all 5 stars or not people that are destined for some of the strong blue blood programs. It seems like he's got a pretty unique eye for talent in what he wants to get out of the different positions, which I think for me is reassuring because this all seems so dreamlike to me. It's hard for me to imagine that we'd ever have a top 10 recruiting class. Also hard for me to imagine that we're number one in the country with a Heisman Trophy on its way to Bloomington as well, though. Well,
I think that's one of the big things to remember too with his talent side. It's good that you highlighted that because that's basically what he was at Alabama. He was in charge of recruiting for Saban for the time that he was there. And I mean, to be that for Saban, you have to have a good eye because Saban wants you to identify the top talent that is also a fit for their program, which, maybe that's a little bit more expansive, but it's still Alabama and they're being very picky too. And so they're trying to get the best of the best. And the fact that he was able to identify that and do that for Saban, I think has set him up well to now do that because not only has he done that and then had a lot of other experience. I mean, that was 10, 15 years ago that he was doing that for Alabama. So now, to your point, he's seen a lot of football and he knows what he wants out of his program now.
And I just saw that they've locked up both the coordinators, re-upped them with some pretty strong contracts. And I got to be honest, I don't know anything about the offensive or defensive coordinators, other than the fact that if you went into a lab, you couldn't create two people that look more like what you would expect an IU offensive and defensive coordinator to look like. They look like just very kind of normal, salt of the earth. I don't actually know where they're from, but if you told me they're from Kokomo, Indiana, I would be a 100% buyer of that. So, although Cignetti sticks out a bit in terms of the way he talks and the way he runs his program, his coordinators both seem pretty down to earth, pretty chill, pretty quiet from my lens. I don't know if you've got any insights into them at all.
Well, yeah, both of them came over from James Madison with him, and that's one of the interesting things about the college football playoff is not only Cignetti, and not to take any credit away from the guy that's at James Madison that's going to move on to UCLA, but both of his programs made the college football playoff, and James Madison's going to be in there with his mentee there at James Madison, and one of them, the offensive coordinator's name is Mike Shanahan, which I think is funny. He's no connection to the infamous Shanahan football family, but that's been
not that you know of.
Well, that's true. He might just be. He didn't want to have nepotism be involved. He's actually part of the family, but he just said, no, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to be a different Mike Shanahan. But I have this a lot. I was going to make this joke when you're talking about the coordinators being in a lab. I mean, there's a lot of AI going around. Is it possible that we just made them from AI? The people have seen them in real life, so I guess it's not possible. But no, they're both that way, and they both came over from James Madison, and it's amazing that he could take a program from that level. And basically, I mean, the first year they were kind of all at that level. The coaching staff, the players that he recruited from there. He didn't get a lot of big recruits. Otherwise, Rourke wasn't a top he was a good talent, but he wasn't a top recruit in the transfer portal. And then he made that into a back end college football playoff team. Then he layers in guys that actually are bringing it, and then that's Mendoza and some of these other guys. So it's amazing. I think it's pretty sustainable what he did, and it's interesting to see what he's doing to the rest of college football, because now he's making it so that everybody's going, wait a minute, if IU could be converted into this, where's our Signetti? But I think he is kind of a singular talent to a degree, and it's going to be hard to replicate what he's doing, which is part of the reason they probably tied up those coordinators too, because he knows how valuable they are better than anybody else. And you know that this is how these sports work. They're going to want to pull the guys from the successful programs, and those two guys would have been pulled to other programs if they hadn't protected them.
Yeah. Like you said, if they weren't AI generated, they may have been a flight risk. Exactly.
Well, they're going to be very hard to find if they're AI. You're going to try to call them. It's going to be very hard to find them. But yeah, it was smart to lock them down. It seems like they've used whatever funding they're getting there to try to lock down the coaching staff first, and then I don't know really how they're working the NIL piece of it. I'm sure they probably do have a budget like some of the other teams, but I can't imagine it's at the same level as some of the teams that are in that tier.
Right. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see next year. I guess the main question on top of my head is, do you think they go portal to replace? We got to assume Fernando Mendoza is going pro. It'd be a shame if he didn't. Do they go portal to replace him, or does Alberto step up to the plate?
I'd love to see his younger brother get a shot. I have to imagine they're going to take a shot at somebody through the portal. One of the recent names I saw rumored to there was a guy we've had on the show, Ryan Roberts, who's a draft expert. He was doing some portal projections, and the name that he threw, because they're in on a couple of the bigger names, but the name that he threw in there was actually Aiden Childs, who would be transferred from Michigan State here. And that one, I don't know if I see the fit, but I see the talent in him. And when you see what he started with Rourke and with Mendoza, which was a good starting point, but still, Dan wants to jump in here. I think when he heard Childs, he's a Michigan State guy.
Well, yeah, actually the name I heard thrown around, Mr. Him, was actually another former MSU quarterback, Sam Levitt.
Yeah, I've heard that one too.
State.
Yeah,
that would be the best fit.
That would be kind of one of the top guys out there. I found the Childs one interesting because I think it's more now I'm already getting high on my pedestal here with the IU stuff, but that might not be that's going to be more of a reclamation project, whereas Levitt has already done very well, and that's going to be one of the top transfers. So I could see him being more interested, but I got to think they're going to take a run at somebody while still potentially giving a chance to Mendoza. I don't know if they're going to try to balance it where maybe they don't go for one of the top guys and say, hey, we're gonna make you this way. But the good news is that they've gotten a full year to see what he is, because he's played a decent amount because of the success of the team, and I feel like at least they'll know for sure whether or not he can make that transition.
Well, there are some experts out there that suggest that Alberto is even better than his brother if given the chance, and that he should have been the one at the Heisman ceremony getting the trophy. Those experts are my 12-year-old son. He's all in on Alberto.
I love how devoted he is to the younger brother of the Heisman Trophy winner. You got to admire his devotion. So that's good. And I mean, he's certainly got a lot of traits himself. So it's not like he's. It's crazy to think that he might not be successful in this system under Signetti, especially because he has something that the other two didn't have, which is continuity. He's been in the system now for a full year. Rourke and Mendoza didn't have that. They just showed up and kind of took it on from day one. But he's got more knowledge of that system than either of those two did when they started.
Yeah, and it'll be good. If nothing else, it's good for confidence to know that Signetti knows exactly what he's got with Alberto. So guess I'll wait and see what decision he makes, and then I'll call into your show and second guess him later.
Well, yeah, that's what the call-ins do. So that would be a good use of call-ins here, because we talked with Shayne about doing call-ins, and he wants to do some inspirational stories and things like that, and that would be great. But it would be hard for me to transition from what we do to then people calling in and saying they want to fire Brad Holmes or fire Signetti because he had 9 wins after making it to the number 1 seed here. But yeah, it's fun to talk a little IU, because I do think they're worth talking about. We're more of a general football show now with the new format, and I'm glad I got to do it with you here, because it's been a lifelong journey for us with IU, and there's a lot of fans, and I mean the fandom has grown here with Indiana football, so we might even have a chance to talk them a little bit more as they go on, because you got to talk some college football playoff here and work that into the show, even with the NFL gearing up towards the playoffs, because they're worth talking about. They're a good story, in addition to, like I said, Trinidad Chambliss earlier in the show, a local kid who's at Ole Miss. Hopefully they do pretty well, but I used the story, so I'm glad you called in. I'm glad we could talk about it, and hopefully we can talk some more Hoosiers, because it was a good conversation.
For sure. And I do think, because I'm a longtime listener to your show, too, I do think you've had some pretty phenomenal call-ins in the past. I think I remember your Super Bowl segment. And if I remember right, I think your Eagles calling guy picked the score much closer than any other expert I had seen. So just worth knowing that you've got a bit of a strong track record with call-ins, too. So maybe something to lean into in the future.
Are you saying there's untapped intelligence in the audience that we should bring on more? I mean, intelligence is kind of Ryan's background, so maybe he should investigate this.
Yeah, I think if you can find the right people in the rabid fan bases, I think you might be onto something.
I like it. Well, we'll look for those call-ins. I do remember those 2 call-ins. That's the only other time that we've taken a call-in, and I have to say they were pretty good. I've tried to follow up the gentleman that was from Kansas City, Sean. I tried to get him on because we did a counter intel segment with Kansas City since they were on the docket this year, but I couldn't find him, so I'm not sure where he went. And so Dan will have to track him down.
Yeah. No, I tried reaching out, and his wife actually answered the phone and said he was in rehab for substance abuse issues. So I don't know what that means. I mean, thoughts and prayers for
Could be root beer. Yeah,
root beer. I just don't know.
It can get heavy in that sector there. That's funny that it was him that had those issues, and not the first guy. He seemed a little bit more rambunctious. The first guy.
The wife said he was highly functioning, good in masking. Like you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't, he didn't leave his life, he lived with it. So that was, I don't know, seems like an interesting character though.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
I did. I had my questions about him when I learned that he actually printed out his blogs and emailed them out instead of posting them online. But I think the fact you found him to begin with was amazing. So I'm sure you can do it again. I
mean, there's still some virality to email marketing. So I don't know. Maybe we can get on his email list somehow. What do you think, Dan? You were going to jump back in here.
Oh, I didn't really have anything. I just had my finger on the button. I mean, the printing out the blogs thing, I kind of forgot about that. But yeah, I just like the idea of blogging into your own printer.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, we'll have to try to track him down. Then maybe we've got some intel on where he ended up. But you're right about that. So we might do this more, especially with the success of this segment. But we appreciate you joining the show, and hopefully we'll have you on the show in the future in some shape or form here.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. Great show. And Ryan, is it okay if I tell them how to find me online?
Yes,
the listeners,
go for it.
If you guys look for my Facebook and send me a message, my wife will let me know, and then I'll get back to you.
He's hard to find too.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the good material every week too. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks to Matt. Yeah, Dan was right to highlight the fact that we just had the first name. So Matt Kruska joining us on the show there. In case anybody, he doesn't check his Facebook. That's why he referenced that.
That's pretty funny. I was hoping we'd get more insight from the 12-year-old insider.
Yeah, Yafi is good, as well as his other son Eli. So they're good sources of information. Never know when you're going to get where you're going to get intel from. So that's a good point by Dan. But we're going to take a quick break and then come back and finish up the show here. So you're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Welcome back to Shayne Graham's Extra Points with Ryan Walsh, presented by Encore Business Group. I want to thank all of our sponsors, including Encore Business Group, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Williams Chiropractic, Elite Winning Solutions, and Sal's Complete Home Painting and Handyman Services. I want to thank our guests, Brock Vierra, Tyler Sawa, and my buddy Matt Kruska for talking some IU with us. That was fun. I want to thank Dan for keeping me straight here. We had kind of a different show, but I thought it was a fun show, and we're feeling very festive with our lights.
Yeah, the string of lights really picked up the energy, and like I said, it was different, but I had fun.
Yeah, we got a call in on, so maybe we'll do that more. But appreciate him keeping us on track, and then be sure to tune in to the rest of the Jethro lineup. I was telling the fans, Dan, that I don't necessarily always highlight the daytime shows. So we got Dave Conrad and Conrad's Country Bunker on 9 to 2, and then Rowdy Yates 2 to 7, and then you've got the Sports Project, his two shows, Sports Project on the weekend, 10 to 12 on Saturday, and then 7 to 9 on Wednesday, the primetime show. You got Polka Pops and the All Request Show with Jeff Isaac on Saturday there as well. You got Sports Intel on Mondays, 7 to 9, and then you've got our show 7 to 9 on Thursday. So tune in to us next week, and thanks for kicking with us. Have a great week.